After launching the first invasion into Russia since World War II, Ukraine's objectives for its Kursk incursion are coming into view. The 2-week-old campaign was barely acknowledged by Ukraine initially, but President Volodymyr Zelenskyy recently laid out some of the goals his forces are trying to achieve. For starters, Ukraine needs to shore up its political support. Zelenskyy said it's essential Ukraine enters the fall even stronger than before, so taking Russian territory and capturing dozens of Russian soldiers is a good way for Kyiv to show its supporters it can win the war. Zelenskyy and plenty of others are also pointing to the incursion as the latest proof Russia's red lines are more or less bombastic bluffs. Time and time again, Vladimir Putin and his cronies in the Kremlin said Moscow would be forced to use nuclear weapons if Ukraine received certain items from the West, like artillery, tanks, air defense systems, and F-16 fighter jets. Even with parts of its own territory under siege and hundreds of thousands of its own people displaced, which was another Russian red line, Moscow is seemingly no nearer a nuclear launch today than when the war began 2.5 years ago. Two more objectives for Ukraine during this attack create dilemmas for Russia and a defensive buffer for Ukraine. This is a map of the area right here showing the battle lines and regions of control. The dark areas here and here are the Donbas and Crimea areas that Russia illegally seized in 2014. These other shaded areas here in red are the eastern parts and southern parts of Ukraine that Russia is now trying to take control of. Now, in the east, in the Donbas region, Russia is getting very close to making strategic gains. Ukraine does not want that to happen. This area up here to the north is where the incursion into Russia is taking place. The dilemma for Russia right now, should it keep its troops and reserves and continue the campaign in the Donbas, or should it reposition its troops and reserves to push out the foreign invaders in Kursk? Russia has the power and the resources to do both for right now, but not forever. As it stands right now, Ukraine has the momentum in Kursk, no doubt. In just the last 72 hours, Ukrainian forces took out 3 bridges over the same river. So let's go ahead and take a look at that same river on the battlefield and kind of give you a better idea of what this all means in the greater picture. So the same river is right about here, running to the border. And there are 3 bridges on this river that Ukraine has struck. And now these bridge locations are approximate. I am not a cartographer, but they're about in these regions, right? There's 3 locations that Ukraine was able to take out. And those bridges were the primary method of escape for the hundreds of Russian soldiers that are now in this area, trapped between Ukrainian soldiers and no route of escape. So what Ukraine is doing is essentially creating what is known as a cauldron in this area. So you have Ukrainian troops coming in from this area, and this area, and this area. The Russian troops can't escape. They've tried to set up pontoon boats and barges and that sort of thing. The number of FPV strikes in this area has gone up significantly. Every time the Russians try to set up a pontoon or a barge, it gets blown up. So now the Russians that are trapped in this cauldron area are going to need to decide what they want to do. Do they want to surrender, or do they want to try to fight to the death? Also, if Ukraine can try to replicate the success that they're having in the Kursk area and create a buffer zone where they're pushing back all of the Russian offensive forces, essentially, pushing back the artillery lines, pushing back the point of attack for the glide bombs that Russia's using with their bomber jets to launch these glide bombs to devastating effect on all of these border communities in Ukraine. If Ukraine can push those forces back, it would buy a buffer zone for this area and allow some relief. It will also force the Russians to decide how do they want to expel a foreign force from its own borders. Up until now, the way that Russia has been fighting is just overwhelming artillery, overwhelming bombs to level the area. That tactic might have to change if they're fighting on their own land. For Straight Arrow News, I'm Ryan Robertson. We have plenty more stories on the Ukraine-Russia war on our website, san.com. You can also download the Straight Arrow News app today.
News.